Welcome to another technical comparison episode by TST Industries. I'm Stephen Fox, and today I'm going to be bringing you some different integrated taillight options for the 2013 and up Kawasaki Ninja 300. This is a popular bike, therefore some popular taillights, and I'm going to be showing you some differences between the taillight that we have developed at TST against some of our main competitors for things like aesthetics, build quality, installation, lighting features, brightness, and pricing. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, the first thing that I want to do is preface the conversation we're about to have. Obviously, I'm a part of TST Industries. My opinion on our particular taillight might seem biased, but I'm going to try to present all of the information to you guys in as factual of a way as possible. Some things are obviously going to come down to a matter of opinion, stuff like aesthetics. So it will ultimately be up to you to decide which taillight you like the best, but the job here that we can do is simply show you what all of the different ones look like, and then you can make your own decision. First topic that we want to cover is aesthetics. I believe most people looking to get an integrated taillight for their Ninja 300 are interested in cleaning up the entire tail section of their bike, so obviously aesthetics is going to be a primary concern. First taillight I'm going to cover is the Oem Unit, because that basically paves the foundation for some small changes of all the aftermarket options. For those of you that own a Ninja 300, you obviously know what this looks like. It comes with a red lens because it's a regular white incandescent bulb on the inside, and this is a brake-only unit, obviously. This installs really well on the bike. There are no fitment issues from Kawasaki, so thumbs up there. And overall, you kind of know what this taillight in general looks like when it's installed on the bike. So with that foundation in place, let me first discuss the TST unit and some subtle differences. Obviously, the first thing that you're going to notice is the hexadome light dispersing elements on the lens. And then another important aesthetic difference with the TST unit is once you turn it on, you will notice that our light coverage for this particular taillight extends basically the full width of the taillight. As we'll see in some of the other aftermarket options, that's not always the case. We actually modified the bucket geometry extensively in order to fit more PCB space on the inside so that we could add that additional coverage at the very tips. Obviously, the TST unit, when installed on the bike, fits really well. We didn't have any fitment issues. And the last thing I want to cover is that we do offer all of our taillights in the clear and smoked lens option. We have the smoked installed here on this white Ninja 300. The smoked happens to be the more popular model. We find people really like the way that this ends up looking, and I think that's for good reason. Next taillight I'm going to go into is the eBay Special. I really don't like this taillight. Being an engineer, I can usually understand some design decisions that other engineers will make when developing a product. The outer geometry has changed ever so slightly on the lens. You can see they modified its look a little bit. We do have a smoked unit in-house. I do believe you can find this in clear from a couple of places on eBay. When it does illuminate, it has this weird blue bar up at the top, which I think is a really bad idea for a taillight. And then you'll notice that the coverage is pretty abysmal. It doesn't extend edge to edge. And it's also very dim, which we'll get into in just a second. Last thing I will note is the fit and finish once installed. I noticed that these mounting bosses don't work very well with the stock bracket, so it left really large gaps to the rear fairings once we had this thing in place. It was able to wobble around a lot, and in general, it just didn't look like it was mating to the bike very well. Next one I'm going to move on to is Motodynamic. Obviously, their large aesthetic difference here is that chromed internal reflector. The overall geometry of the light otherwise is pretty much the same. Fit and finish went really well on the bike, and Motodynamic does offer a clear and smoked lens. So in reality, if you're the type of person that likes the look of this chrome reflector, then that would make it probably the taillight for you. And ultimately, it is your personal opinion that really matters. So there you go. Moving on to the last one that we have here, that's custom LED. This is probably most similar to the TST unit as far as aesthetics goes. Installation was fine, no fitment gaps. The lens overall is very similar. You'll even see some of these light dispersing elements on the lens. Ours are hexagonal in pattern. Theirs are more square, so just a very slight difference there, but they basically achieve the same function. They actually deploy very similar LEDs to what we do. But the biggest difference in this unit to like the TST unit is just the amount of coverage. As soon as you boot this thing up, you'll notice that there's quite a large gap between the edge of where the LEDs go to the end of the taillight. So there is a good section that isn't illuminated in the custom LED unit. The second topic we're going to cover is brightness. I think that that's also something that a lot of people are concerned about when going with an integrated unit. What we did here is install all of these different taillights onto the Ninja 300, and we showed what they look like when viewed from the rear, when viewed at a slight angle off center, and then we took all of them, we shut down all of the lights and reflected each taillight onto a subject so that you could see how bright that reflection was, which allows you to get a much better feel for how bright these taillights are and what their light emission pattern looks like, rather than just looking at the taillight itself. So the first one that we're going to have up is the Oem unit. Overall, it does pretty well. Obviously, it doesn't have any turn signals inside, unlike all of the integrated taillight options we have here. So there are no turn signal brightness to consider, but running light is okay coming from this incandescent bulb. Brake light is a little bit brighter. And overall, this basically just establishes our baseline. Obviously, if you're going with an aftermarket taillight option, you want it to be this bright or brighter. Now we're going to touch on the TST unit. You can see how it looks from the different angles for running, brake, and then the two turn signals. Coming up with the brightness onto the subject matter, you can actually see that this does have a significantly brighter peak value than the Oem unit. And you'll also take notice that the chart is very gradual in slope. Our peak is where it is, but then the fall off as you view the taillight off center is a nice gentle gradation. So basically that just means that if there's a car or any other person on the road viewing your bike from something off center, there's a pretty good chance that it's still going to be very bright for them to see. Next taillight I'm going to go into is the eBay Special. This thing was absolutely horrendous in brightness. I think that's extremely unsafe for that matter. You can see what it looks like in the running, and the brake light is really not that much brighter. In fact, the brake light on these is not as bright as the running light on any of the other taillights on the table. And then when you have the turn signals illuminating, you can barely see them. I actually noticed there's a difference in brightness for the left and right turn signal on this unit. Have no idea why that would be that way. And if you have the brake light engaged and then you go to signal, you can't see the taillight anymore because the whole thing is just so dim. They can't shine through. So really don't like this. It barely registered on our reflection chart. With that said, that'll conclude the eBay unit. Moving on to the Moto Dynamic next. You'll notice what it looks like when viewed from the rear. Their side coverage is also pretty good. And now moving on to the reflection chart, you'll notice that their peak brightness values for brake are pretty similar to the TST unit, and they also had a really decent side viewing coverage. So in general, I would say that those two patterns are pretty similar. Obviously, with their internal reflector and their minimal number of LEDs, this does look a little bit more like a point light source. That's very obvious whenever you look at the taillight. So just do keep that in mind. That's kind of a result of the way that that is designed on the inside. And now with our last taillight, the custom LED, you can see how it looks from the rear, the sides, with turn signals on, etc. And now moving on to the reflection chart, you will notice that the custom LED light does have the highest peak value. And they do typically tout some of their taillights to be the brightest on the market. And if you solely look at the peak value, that would be the case in this matter. You'll notice that from the side viewing coverage, it's a little bit dimmer than the Moto Dynamic or TST unit, and then their peak value does come in pretty high, but their focal area is a little bit narrower than the others, is basically what I'm getting at. And then their side viewing coverage isn't quite as good as the TST or Moto Dynamic unit. And to wrap up this brightness section, we've gone ahead and put together a compilation. So you can see here all 4 of the aftermarket integrated taillight options right next to each other. Take a look at the brightness pattern, so that's what they look like from center going out to the edge, and then obviously take a look at just how physically bright they are. Next screen is going to be the compilation of all of the brightness charts. So again, take a look at how the light falls off and the peak values. The third subject we're going to cover in this video are lighting features. Obviously, these being integrated taillights, they have turn signaling functionality built in, so that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm really getting at here are some of the different enhancements or lighting additions that you can program on some of these different units. Coming up first will be the TST. We have, at the current time of filming, January of 2017, 2 different models available to people. We have our standard version and programmable. The standard is exactly as you'd expect. Kind of functions like the regular OEM light for running and braking, and then the turn signals just flash on and off in a normal fashion. Our programming taillight allows you to turn on or off 2 different features. The first one's going to be the strobe brake alert. That's where you go to pull in your front brake to slow down, and the brake light will flash a couple of times before staying on constant. Then the second feature is going to be sequential turn signals. That's where you go to indicate. The taillight is going to illuminate the central LEDs first, and then they are going to quickly work their way to the outside in a sequential pattern. Last thing I want to touch on for lighting features is how you change this stuff on the different taillights. So on the TST unit, we have our programming button, which is easily accessible on the back of the unit. And that is what allows you to get into those different programming modes, even when this is installed on the bike. Next up, I have the Eba Tail Light. This has no programmable features to speak of. It's completely standard in functionality as you would expect, and unfortunately you cannot turn those blue LEDs off. Moving on to Moto Dynamic. This is very similar to the programmable TST model. They only offer this one version, which is programmable, and the 2 features that they allow you to turn on or off are the strobe brake function and the sequential turn signals. To change those different settings, they have this small hole in the back of the bucket. You would pull this little grommet out, and then deep within you have the PCB where they have a little programming button that you can toggle in order to go through those different states. And now we have our last Taillight Custom LED. They also only have one version, which is programmable. They do have a couple of different stuff that you can do on here. So they do advertise like 11 different brake alert modes, I believe, and you can also change a couple of additional things like how bright the running light is or how bright the turn signals are. You can also do a strobe mode, which I'm not really sure when that would become handy, but in general, you can change the way the brake alert function works, but you cannot turn on or off sequential turn signals. They don't allow that in their programming features. The way that you change those is this 5th additional wire. You would put this into a ground, and then through their instructions, you can see how to get into the programming state and change some of those different options. Moving on to our 4th subject, we have installation. Covering the TST one first. This is going to be a plug-and-play wiring installation, something that everybody's looking for. So we have the normal Kawasaki plugs that will go right into your 2013 and up Ninja 300. We also have a proper wire length on here. They're not excessively long nor too short to work, so that's good to note. And like all of the other taillights on here, we use a similar mounting fashion as the OEM, where there's this stock bracket that goes onto these little mounting bosses, and then you get that whole unit onto the bike. The only additional difference for the TST unit in particular is that we have a professional installation video that accompanies this product, where Bart will show you step by step how to go from an OEM unit to our integrated taillight on your bike really easily. Moving on to the installation for the eBay special. Oh boy, this was a pain. What am I supposed to do with this? Had to spend as much money as the taillight just to make a wiring harness.
Why are there blue lights? 4 hours to install that thing, and it looks like crap. Wow.
Okay, so this taillight comes with a completely generic plug that has nothing to do with your Ninja 300. In order to get this on the bike, you would have to do some custom wiring. I wound up creating this harness that let me go from the taillight's plug to the regular Kawasaki plugs. This took me a really long time, and the other thing I'll mention is that even if this were somehow compatible, the wires are too short. So it basically just goes to show that the people that make this taillight really have no idea what they're designing it for. Now we'll move on to the Moto Dynamic unit. This is relatively straightforward, similar to the TST unit. They have the regular main harness plug, and then they have bullet connectors here. But what Moto Dynamic has chosen to do is supply this little resistor pack with their taillight. So it has the bullet connectors on one end. They get installed to the taillight. That allows turn signaling current to go through the resistor, and then you have the regular Kawasaki plugs on the other side. So it does end up being plug and play. The mounting bosses worked well for the stock bracket, so everything went on relatively easily. My only qualm there is that after you put on the resistor pack, you have a ton of excess wire that you just have to route through the sub tray and then find somewhere to kind of neatly tuck away once everything is all said and done. Moving on to our last unit, we have custom LED. Again, plug and play, their wire link was good. They have this 5th additional wire that you have to put in. This is how you do your programming features if you do want to unlock those. This is relatively easy to wire in, but it does ask you to go into just like a ground on your bike somewhere through a switch. So that is one additional thing you would have to do if you want to get to those programming features. Otherwise, this installation was just like the others, being plug and play. Now for build quality, overall, I'd have to say that the main integrated taillight options you should be looking at have very similar and excellent build quality. The bucket and lens is high quality injection molded components. I know on the TST unit, they're put together so well with a really strong adhesive that it was actually really challenging for us to separate them in order to get to the PCBs inside. And just looking at the Moto Dynamic and custom LED, I don't have any qualms there. I think that these go together really well. I know that they're made in very similar fashions, and I don't see any excess adhesive or something like that on these particular units. So that's looking good. You know, overall for the main ones, I do think you're going to be in good hands with any option that you choose. All right, let's wrap up this video by going over pricing. I'm going to go from cheapest to most expensive. Down at the bottom, we do have the eBay special. I was able to find these between $26 and $30. And guys, I have to say, for what you're getting, I think it's pretty clear that that's a waste of 30 bucks. Next up, we actually have the standard TST taillight. We're able to offer this today at $77, and then our programmable taillight version is a $20 premium, so that comes in at $97. Two quick things to note about TST. You are able to package together a couple additional items for your Ninja 300, like a fender illuminator, flasher relay, and a couple other items. And if you do all of those together with the taillight, you're able to save yourself 10 to 11 bucks in the process. Not only that, but we're also currently offering free domestic shipping for any order over $38. So if you get a taillight by itself, no matter what, you'll be getting it shipped for free in the United States. Moving on, we have Moto Dynamic. They have their single version that comes in today at just under $80 at $79.95. And then at the top, we have custom LED with a little bit of a price premium. This is going to be coming in today at $130. That is going to conclude it for this technical comparison episode. I know it got a little lengthy, but I do hope we were able to present a lot of valuable information to you guys that will let you make a smarter buying decision. Now, when it does come to TST, I can say that we try to put a really good balance into our products, squeeze a lot of functionality, features, and quality into a price point that's approachable for a lot of people. We really try to create the best bang for the buck product that we can. Now, if you guys have any questions or comments about anything you see on the table, feel free to leave them below this video. And I do encourage you to head on over to tstindustries.com to get our taillight ordered online.
Otherwise, I'm Stephen Fox, and I will catch you guys next time.